And now, please welcome to the stage Dr. Natalia Canham, Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, for a conversation on navigating the Nexus, reproductive rights, and the SDGs, with FP's Alison Carlson.
And those were a couple great conversations about mental health and AIDS and a number of other conversations that we've had today. Thank you so much for staying with us and joining us today. I'm honored to be able to close out our health forum with Dr. Natalia Canham. Really excited to talk and focus now about women and reproductive health and sexual rights. There has been some, but maybe not enough discussion yet today about women. And I would love to hear from you. We're amid the SDG global stocktake, and sexual and reproductive health are either directly or indirectly linked to at least 17 of the SDGs and vital for economic and social development. And so when you think about where we're at the moment and amid backsliding on reproductive health and rights in the US and around the world, what are you doing and what is the agency doing to really focus on access to reproductive health care?
Thanks, Alison. Really happy to be here, and I'm glad to see foreign policy focusing on not just health, but the global consensus that this 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly represents, to line up behind the Sustainable Development Goals, which promise prosperity and better well-being for all. And the magic word for all has to include the half of the population, which is women and girls, who are so often much more vulnerable. Now, you understand that we're in an era of questioning the validity, dare I say even the value, of prioritizing women and girls' rights. And this type of backsliding is dangerous. It's certainly dangerous for women and girls who, from a whole host of bodily autonomy issues. I could start with family planning. We could move on to discuss the fact that in 2023, maternal mortality, the preponderance of which is preventable, is stagnating and in some places going backwards when we review this. And of course, the scourge of gender-based violence, which is prevalent in every category of human experience, but women and girls are victimized up until femicide. These are issues that have to do with fundamental human rights and the political will that a health system has to be designed to serve the people who are most in need. So for UNFPA, certainly we are demanding zero unmet need for family planning. This is one of the best investments if you want to look at it dollar for dollar. But in terms of empowering a woman or an adolescent girl, being able to plan when and whether you're going to be pregnant is going to determine a lot of your future. Are you going to finish school? Are you going to be able to hold a job or create jobs as an entrepreneur? Similarly, we say that there's a moral issue to maternal health backsliding. This implies that the woman who is walking to the clinic right now for prenatal care, and it's going to take her a while to get there in the hot sun, needs to be assured that when she arrives, the midwife is going to be there, that the clinic will be open, and the provisions for the supplies that she needs for her good health are going to be there. So again, I think the policies and the prioritization of women and girls has huge benefits for all in society, but inherently in the human rights proposition, we've got to look after the people who need it the most.
Yeah, and your point on so much of it is preventable is really striking. And not only the impact that it has when you address prevention, and when we were talking about resources before and utilization of resources, the impact they can have. And as you're saying, cascading impacts for women's lives, their families, their communities, for countries from an economic and social perspective. It's astounding that there isn't the prioritization that it needs. And so when you think about that, and when you think about this moment, and again, we're all here amid the discussions and high-level meetings about universal access, it's exactly what we're talking about here, but yet it's not being prioritized. And so from your perspective, what needs to happen this week, and how can women and the rights of women and girls be more fundamentally and materially embedded in the discussions that are being had in ways that can meaningfully translate an impact on the ground?
Well, that's a great question. And in a way, it's saying, why should we be hopeful that things are going to change? We should be hopeful that things are going to change because women are actually demanding these rights. Women are actually not sitting back shyly and watching their bodily autonomy evaporate. There is a demand, even within our meetings at the United Nations this week, and in the civil society, which actually shapes the politics, shapes the policies, and the allocation of resources, because again, if something is worth it, you've got to pay for it. So I have great confidence in the generation of young women who are transforming the discussion, whether online, in person, and in communities. When women's groups and young people's groups are funded, they absolutely understand the connection between data and accountability. You got to count it, you got to measure it in order to prioritize it and in order to know how we're doing. So this is one aspect of UNFPA, which is the United Nations Population Agency, but we transformed to work on sexual and reproductive health and rights because this is how you defend the well-being of the population. And why do we focus on women and girls? Because every data point, every evidence shows who is most vulnerable. So as universal health coverage is being discussed here in the halls of the UN during the General Assembly, there is a clamor from the civil society, but we partner with the World Health Organization. We partner so well with other arms of the UN, especially the humanitarian arms, because women and girls in crisis, I know you discussed climate here today, the mental health discussion that preceded this today. All of these are gendered. All of these affect women and girls, and especially younger women and girls of reproductive age disproportionately. So the plans for humanitarian assistance need to prioritize women and girls issues. Every month, women and girls are going to menstruate. So why not supply for their hygiene needs in advance and with priority? Similarly for family planning, if people know that contraception prevents you from getting pregnant, ergo from needing an abortion, if with access, I mean, it's unconscionable. There's 250 million women waiting for the health system to provide modern contraception that works for them. So I think, we certainly believe that heads of state, but also people on the ground are going to reshape this agenda. And UNFPA certainly will be there to insist that we prioritize the rights of women and girls in health. Can I just also quickly add that it's one thing to say that the service is there, but like I was mentioning, when the woman is walking, if the door is closed, all is lost. Midwives, the backbone of health services for women right now in Afghanistan, in many parts of Africa, in all the 150 locations around the world where UNFPA works, midwives are a scarce, precious nursing resource. And we've joined with others to say we're going to help train more and double the availability of midwives on the ground in the communities where it counts.
You raised so many important points about assessing what the specific issues are in countries and communities and having the data to be able to really understand that in a way that we can inform the policies that are being developed, the interventions that are contextually relevant and driven by the local communities. And so I appreciate that, and I think so much more needs to be done to that end, and also the partnerships that you're talking with those on the ground. And so, in the few minutes we have left, what then are your hopes for this week, and what needs to be done to galvanize not just more women and girls, but an understanding that this is a collective action problem, and we need to incorporate everyone? What else needs to happen?
Great points, Allison. Two things need to happen. One is deliberate financing or the type of development which gives the greatest good for the investment. And here, like this week, it's been so exciting. Yesterday, Melinda Gates announced $100 million towards sexual and reproductive health and rights. She was joined by the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, SIF, who put up another, between the Global Financing Facility and UNFPA, another $100 million. We want domestic financing. We want women and girls, family planning, everything that we've been talking about built into the regular budget of every country. And we also, and this is the second part, we want to depoliticize this debate. We want women's rights to be respected without the need for consent of your husband or whoever it is that has to sign for you. As an intelligent human being who knows what's good for you and the family, we want women's agency to be fully respected. And here, the guys are going to have to step up. Men hold power in the patriarchal societies that we have at the moment. And it's a wonderful thing for a young sports guy to interrupt misogyny online and say, no, 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 this is wrong and stop it. But it's also important for policy, which is primarily set by men, to be designed with the women and girls who are affected at that table, for the young people to be invited in. So I think that's going to make a big difference, and that's what universal health coverage is going to put the universal in UHC.
Very well put. Thank you so much for joining us and for